Eleanor Hart owned a loyal heart and a scarred mastiff everyone underestimated. Together, they exposed a dark conspiracy, winning.
The Duke gave Eleanor the mastiff everyone called Savage after it bit through the steward's glove in the manor yard. He expected her to refuse. Refusal would make her eviction simple. Instead, she removed its chain and noticed the dog watched hands. Not faces the habit of an animal trained to detect commands. Hours later, wild creatures rushed her lambing pens. The mastiff did not attack them first. It turned toward the hedge and growled at a man holding the Duke's silver whistle. The man disappeared before Eleanor could see his face. A sharp note cut through the darkness. 3 foxes broke from the hedge, while 2 larger. Dog-like shapes raced toward the flock. The sheep surged toward the southern fence and the ravine beyond it. "Hold," Eleanor commanded. The mastiff stiffened, one torn ear turning toward her, while his eyes remained fixed on the whistle. Another signal sounded, 2 short notes and 1 long. He flinched as though struck, then planted himself between Eleanor and the hedge. He knew that command, and he feared the hand giving it. A fence rail cracked behind her. Eleanor dragged open the inner gate, caught the lead ewe by the jaw, and forced her into the stone lambing yard. "Bring them." The mastiff swept around the flock without touching a sheep. He blocked the ravine and drove every ewe toward Eleanor. When a feral dog lunged after the last lamb, the mastiff struck it from the side. The intruders fled. All 27 sheep survived, though 1 lamb cut its leg on the broken rail. The mastiff remained facing the hedge. That morning, Gideon Harcourt, the Duke's steward, had called him savage after the animal tore through Harcourt's glove in the manor yard. Yet his teeth had never reached flesh. Eleanor had seen Harcourt curl 2 fingers against his palm just before the bite, as though giving a signal. The Duke of Blackmere had watched from the manor steps. For 3 months, Eleanor had petitioned him to repair the northern hedge. 7 lambs had vanished, but Harcourt claimed she sold them and invented a tax, unless she restored the required number within 7 days. The tenancy her father had held for 31 years would end when Harcourt ordered the mastiff destroyed. Eleanor had said, "Give him to me." The Duke placed the chain in her hand and called the dog protection, warning that if she refused the estate's help, he would hear no further complaint. It was a trap dressed as generosity. She accepted because the animal's eyes held vigilance, not cruelty. Now she approached him with her lantern lowered. "I will not strike you." He looked past her to a strip of dark green cloth caught on the damaged hedge, the same wool worn by Blackmere's outdoor servants. Beside it, a large bootprint carried a triangular iron repair on its heel. Someone from the estate had used the Duke's whistle to drive trained animals at her flock. The mastiff sniffed the print, growled, then seized Eleanor's skirt and pulled her backward. A hidden rope snapped tight where she had been kneeling. Its weighted loop struck the hedge and closed around empty air at the height of her throat. The trap had not been set for a fox, a sheep, or the dog. It had been set for her. She cut the rope without touching the knot and wrapped both pieces in her apron. Her father had taught her that a frightened animal showed what had happened if a person was patient enough to read it. A damaged gate could do the same. So could mud, wool, wire, and every careless mark left by a man who believed a woman would notice only what he told her to see. Eleanor carried the injured lamb into the cottage and cleaned its leg while the mastiff remained outside the door. She placed bread and broth on the step. He ignored both until she withdrew. Only then did he eat, keeping his body angled toward the northern field. At dawn, she found him asleep across the threshold. He woke when she moved, but he did not rise. That small surrender felt more valuable than obedience. Eleanor named him Bracken for the dark fern covering the western slope, though she did not speak the name aloud until he chose to follow her into the barn. Beneath his filthy outer collar, she found a second band of cracked leather fitted close against his neck. A brass plate was hidden on its inner surface. Northwatch, 7. It read, followed by a smaller line, Caddock of Blackmere. The name meant nothing to her, but the workmanship did. No farmer bought such a collar for a worthless dog. She copied every letter into her stockbook, then examined the scars beneath it. Most were old, narrow, and parallel. A whip, not teeth. Bracken watched her hands throughout the examination. Eleanor kept each movement slow and visible. When she finished, he touched his nose to her wrist. By mid-morning, she had repaired the broken rail with timber salvaged from the shed. She hung strips of white cloth along the northern hedge to expose any movement and spread damp ashes near the gaps to catch prints. Then she walked to the village smithy with the triangular heel mark drawn on paper. Matthew Pike. The smith. Frowned at it. I fitted 3 of those this winter. 1 to the Duke's underkeeper, 1 to a carter from Penrith, and 1 to Mr. Harcourt's own field boots. Can you tell which Eleanor asked? Not from a drawing. He glanced toward the door before lowering his voice, but the nail pattern might. He showed her how he placed 4 nails around the point of the iron. The print at her hedge had shown only 3. Someone lost a nail recently. Eleanor thanked him and left before Harcourt's clerk. Visible across the lane. I could see where she had been. She went next to John Bell's cottage. John was 15, small for his age, and unable to hear since a fever in childhood. He worked in the estate kennels because animals did not care that he spoke with his hands. Eleanor had treated his mother's milk cow the previous spring, and he greeted her without suspicion. When she drew 2 short lines and 1 long line to represent the whistle, the boy's expression changed. His fingers moved quickly. 7 returns. 6 stays. 7 takes the arm. He pointed toward Blackmere, then crossed both hands, sharply gone. Northwatch 7, Eleanor asked. John nodded. He mimed a large dog, then held 1 palm over the other like a shield. Protect, not hunt. Next, he touched 2 fingers to his palm. The same signal Harcourt had made before Bracken seized the glove. Disarm. Eleanor's stomach tightened. Harcourt had knowingly commanded the dog in the courtyard. Then called the trained response an attack. John drew a tall man with a pointed nose and tapped the brass button on his own green coat. Before he could add more, a shadow crossed the window. Harcourt stood outside. The steward entered without knocking. Miss Hart, I had not expected to find you neglecting your flock so soon. His tone was pleasant, which made John step backward. Eleanor closed her stockbook before Harcourt could see the copied inscription. The flock is secure. Then perhaps you came to return the dog. No. Harcourt looked toward John. This boy is forbidden to discuss estate animals. John could not hear the threat, but he read the steward's face. We discussed his mother's cow, Eleanor said. Harcourt's attention settled on her mud-stained apron. His Grace granted you 7 days. 5 remain. A sensible woman would use them to arrange another home. A sensible steward would repair a hedge before livestock vanished through it. His smile thinned. Be careful. Grief made your father difficult before it made him careless. I would regret seeing the same decline in his daughter. Eleanor's father had died after a fall in that same northern field. Harcourt had called it a drunken accident, though Elias Hart had not taken spirits. Eleanor had lacked the strength then to challenge the estate's account. Now Bracken appeared in the doorway behind the steward. Harcourt's right hand twitched toward his coat. The mastiff lowered his head, but did not advance. Eleanor saw the outline of a narrow object in Harcourt's pocket. You should leave, she said, before your glove suffers another misunderstanding. Colour rose above his collar. He walked out without replying. John waited until the steward crossed the yard, then touched Eleanor's sleeve and made the sign for danger. She nodded. I know. What she did not know was whether the Duke shared that danger or merely lent his crest to it. Adrian Vale, Duke of Blackmere, arrived at Hart's Fold before sunset with no carriage and only one groom. He found Eleanor measuring the gap in the hedge while Bracken stood beside her. The dog did not bare his teeth. He merely watched Adrian's hands. Harcourt tells me you have been questioning my kennel boy, the Duke said. Harcourt tells you many things. Eleanor led him to the lambing yard and showed him the cut leg, the broken rail, the tracks preserved beneath an overturned crate, and the rope loop. Adrian's reserve shifted when he saw where the noose would have closed. You believe someone meant to kill you. I believe someone expected me to kneel there. Why preserve the rope? Because the knot was tied left-handed. The cord came from an estate game net, and the person wearing this cloth stood beside it. She showed him the green strip. Adrian examined it without taking it from her. Every keeper on Blackmere wears this wool. And how many carry your silver whistle? His gaze sharpened. Eleanor described the attack and the hidden man. When she repeated the signal, Adrian's face became unreadable. My father commissioned 12 whistles for the Northwatch kennels. They were numbered. How many remain? Harcourt's inventory says 6. The rest were lost after the kennels closed. Why did they close? Adrian looked toward Bracken. My younger brother, Stephen, died there 8 years ago. A dog was blamed. Bracken's torn ear lifted at the name. Adrian noticed. For the first time, his composure cracked. He crossed the field too quickly, then stopped himself before reaching for the animal. Kadok, he said quietly. Bracken stared at him, but did not move. His name is Bracken now, Eleanor replied. Adrian's jaw tightened. Kadok was the sire. This must be one of his last litter. Stephen called the 7th pup Bran. Did Bran kill your brother? That was Harcourt's conclusion. There was blood on the dog and a bite on Stephen's arm. A trained, disarming bite. Adrian turned to her. What are you implying? That Bracken took Harcourt's glove without breaking skin because he was commanded to do it? If your brother gave the same signal while falling or defending himself. A bite proves very little. The Duke looked back at the dog. 8 years of certainty had begun to move beneath his feet. And Eleanor saw that he hated the movement because part of him wanted it. You have 4 days, he said. Not to save your tenancy. To show me why someone used my whistle at your hedge. And if I fail, Harcourt's notice stands. Then your search for truth costs you nothing. Adrian accepted the rebuke without anger. No, it has already cost more than you know. He removed a signet from his finger and pressed it into the soft wax Eleanor used to mark lamb medicines. This authorizes you to enter the old Northwatch kennel with my groom tomorrow. Harcourt will not be told until you are inside. It was not trust, but it was the first useful risk he had taken. Eleanor covered the wax with a tin cup. 10 o'clock, she said, as Adrian turned away. Bracken followed him 3 paces. The Duke stopped, but did not look back. Bracken gave a quiet whine. Almost too low to hear. Adrian closed his eyes. Then a gunshot sounded from the northern woods, and the mastiff ran toward it. Eleanor and Adrian reached the trees together. The groom followed with the lantern. But Bracken had already disappeared among the hazel trunks. Another shot did not come. Instead, they heard an animal thrashing in brush and a man cursing. Bracken barked once from the bottom of a dry ditch. Eleanor slid down the bank and found him standing over a young red deer caught in a wire snare. The bullet had struck the earth beside it. A keeper in green livery was scrambling up the opposite bank. One of his boots lacked a nail beside its triangular heel plate. Stop, Adrian called. The keeper ran. Adrian's groom pursued him while Eleanor cut the deer free. Bracken held the terrified animal in place without biting. When the wire fell away, it bounded uphill and vanished. Adrian picked up the severed snare. A scrap of raw mutton had been tied above the loop. "This is how they brought foxes near your flock," he said. "Foxes? Perhaps. Not the two trained dogs." Bracken sniffed the empty cartridge on the ground, then carried it to Eleanor. The Duke stared at the mastiff. Stephen taught him that. The words came out rough. He trained the Northwatch dogs to retrieve anything dropped near a threat. Eleanor accepted the cartridge and wrapped it separately. "Then your brother left us a witness. A witness cannot speak. Neither can John Bell. That does not mean he has nothing to say." The groom returned alone, but he recognized the fleeing keeper as Silas Vane, Harcourt's cousin and the man responsible for the Western Game Preserve. Adrian ordered him found and confined. Before leaving, the Duke looked directly at Eleanor. "You were right about the attack. That is not the same as being right about Harcourt." "No, but it is enough for tonight." He stationed the groom at Hart's fold and sent 2 men to mend the hedge before morning. Eleanor did not thank him. Repairs 3 months late were a debt paid. Not a favour. Adrian seemed to understand. The old Northwatch kennel stood behind a yew wall a mile from the manor. Its roof had fallen at one corner, and ivy covered the training yard. Adrian met Eleanor there himself. He had dismissed the groom assigned to escort her after learning the man reported directly to Harcourt. Bracken entered the yard slowly, sniffed a stone water basin, then went to the 3rd kennel door. Scratches marked the wood at shoulder height. Inside, Eleanor found a rusted chain, a cracked feeding bowl, and dark stains on the wall. Adrian remained outside. He was kept here after Stephen died. He said, "For how long?" "Harcourt told me the dog was destroyed the following morning." Eleanor looked at the scars around Bracken's neck. He was not. A loose stone beneath the bowl shifted when she stepped on it. Underneath lay a narrow oilskin packet containing 6 pages from a training register. The entries listed 12 pups, their commands, temperaments, and intended placements. Number 7, Bran was marked Guardian Disposition, refuses pursuit beyond boundary, responds to Stephen Vale and G. H. The final initials had been scratched through, but not deeply enough to hide them. Gideon Harcourt. The last page contained a note in Stephen's hand. G. H. Continues teaching attack commands against my instruction. I will tell Adrian when he returns Friday. Eleanor passed the page to the Duke. Adrian read it twice. Stephen died on Thursday night. The damaged roof creaked in the wind. "And you returned Friday?" Eleanor asked. "For the funeral arrangements." His hand tightened around the paper. "Harcourt," said Stephen drank, "entered the kennel alone and was attacked. I had spent years correcting my brother's debts and quarrels. Believing the worst of him had become easier than asking one more question. Easy beliefs are useful to men who manufacture them." Adrian met her gaze. "You speak from experience. Your steward told the village my father drank before his fall." Eleanor pointed to a column near the page edge. The ink beside G. H. was brown, while the rest had faded to grey. This entry was added later, perhaps months later, but Stephen's note proves Harcourt had access to Bracken and taught him commands. It does not prove murder. You are protecting the strength of the evidence even now. I am protecting the truth from being asked to carry more than it can. Something changed in Adrian's expression, not affection. Not yet, but the first clean measure of respect. He folded the pages along their original creases. "These remain with you. They belong to your estate, which is why Harcourt will search my rooms first." Eleanor accepted the packet. Adrian had surrendered the safer hiding place and part of his authority to her judgment. It cost him visibly. They found the kennel inventory in the manor archive that afternoon. 6 silver whistles were listed, as Adrian had said. But the figures beside the entry had been scraped and rewritten. Eleanor laid thin paper over the page and rubbed charcoal across it. The older indentation showed 12 returned to storage after the kennels closed. Harcourt had signed beneath the altered number. More troubling was a recent contract granting Lord Fenton, a wealthy breeder from Cumberland, the right to inspect Blackmere livestock during the estate's agricultural exhibition in 3 days. The payment promised under a private annex would clear nearly half the estate's winter debt. "What does Fenton want?" Eleanor asked. Adrian unlocked a drawer and removed a letter. The surviving Northwatch bloodline. "He has searched for it for years. My father's dogs could guard a flock without scattering it, face a boar without chasing it into neighboring land, and distinguish a true attack from a decoy. After Stephen's death, I wanted the line ended. Harcourt knew Fenton would pay. If Bracken survived. Yes. Then why give him to me?" Adrian's mouth hardened. "Because Harcourt believed the dog was broken. When you asked for him, Harcourt urged me to agree. If Bracken killed livestock or attacked you, your lease would end without dispute. If he died, the last problem from the kennel died with him." Eleanor thought of the silver whistle in the hedge. And if Bracken proved his training, Fenton would covet him. Harcourt could claim you stole estate property and sell him after your eviction. Adrian turned away from the ledger. "I used the animal, and you, to test a complaint I had not bothered to investigate. Whatever Harcourt intended, that choice was mine. It was the first apology, though not yet a complete one. Eleanor did not soften it for him. Then make a different choice now." Adrian rang for his solicitor and dictated an order suspending Harcourt from estate duties pending an audit. He also delayed the Fenton contract. The solicitor warned that without the payment, Blackmere might default on the autumn interest owed to the Crown Bank. "Then we will meet the debt honestly," Adrian said. "Your Grace, Parliament will hear of it. Let it hear that I prefer embarrassment to fraud." Eleanor saw the risk land. The estate's solvency, his reputation, and the authority he had guarded since inheriting were now exposed. Respect took another unwilling step toward trust. Harcourt did not wait to be suspended. By dusk, he had vanished, taking 2 account books and the remaining whistles. Silas Vane had also escaped the cottage where he was confined. In the empty steward's office, Eleanor found a shallow cupboard behind a map. It held packets of dried blood, fox musk, and strips of green cloth cut from discarded uniforms. There were receipts for 6 feral lurchers purchased under false names and payments to men who had reported missing lambs on 3 neighboring farms. One receipt bore her father's signature. Eleanor knew at once it was false. Eleanor Hart formed the crossbar of every H from right to left because an old break limited his wrist. The signature on the receipt had been written conventionally. Adrian compared it with the tenancy ledger and agreed. The forged document claimed Elias had accepted money to surrender Hart's fold before his death. Harcourt meant to use it if the livestock accusations failed. Beneath the receipts lay a survey showing a proposed access road across Eleanor's northern field to Lord Fenton's adjoining land. The farm was not merely a convenient place to test Bracken. It was the corridor Harcourt needed to move animals and contraband between estates without passing the village toll gate. A cry sounded from the courtyard. John Bell lay beside the mounting block, blood running from his temple. His fingers moved before Eleanor could ask. Man took Bracken. Green cart. Exhibition field. Bracken, who had been sleeping outside the archive door, was gone. Eleanor bound John's wound and left him with the housekeeper. Adrian ordered the gates closed. But the green cart had departed 20 minutes earlier with a pass bearing his own seal. Harcourt still has the matrix used for routine orders, he said. He can duplicate my mark. Then, your seal cannot prove who wrote an order. Nor can your gift of the dog be proved by my word if Fenton claims a prior purchase. Eleanor remembered the courtyard. Dozens of tenants had witnessed Adrian place the chain in her hands, but witnesses could be dismissed as dependents. The gift was entered somewhere. She said, Harcourt made everything formal when formality protected him. They searched the stable daybook. On the morning of the gift, a clerk had written Northwatch Mastiff transferred to E. Hart by order of his grace. No value. The page had been torn out. A stub remained at the binding, and a faint offset of the ink showed on the facing sheet. Eleanor held it to the window, but the words were reversed and incomplete, enough to suggest an entry. Not authenticated. Adrian said, Who made it? My junior stable clerk. Samuel Crane. Where is he? Dismissed this afternoon on Harcourt's authority. Eleanor looked toward the exhibition fields beyond the windows. Tents were already rising for Saturday's show. Harcourt had removed the dog, the clerk, and the direct record while leaving forged papers that made Eleanor appear dishonest. He had also made certain the public venue where Bracken's value would be revealed belonged to Lord Fenton's circle. He wants us to follow, she said. Then we should disappoint him. Adrian looked surprised. You would leave the dog? No. We will recover Bracken. But we will not accuse Harcourt until he commits himself to a lie he cannot alter. She placed the training pages. False receipt. Green cloth. Rope. And cartridge in separate envelopes. First we protect the evidence. Then we find Samuel Crane. After that, we give Harcourt the audience he believes he controls. Samuel Crane had not gone far. Matthew Pike remembered repairing the young clerk's bicycle cart and knew Samuel's widowed sister lived beside the old North toll house. Eleanor and Adrian found him there before midnight, packing clothes with one hand while holding a swollen jaw with the other. Harcourt had dismissed him, struck him, and ordered him out of Blackmere before the exhibition. Samuel admitted making the transfer entry when Adrian gave Eleanor the mastiff. Mr. Harcourt tore out the page after you suspended him, he said. But every livestock transfer has a numbered counterfoil sent to the estate solicitor at month's end. The packet had not yet been mailed. Samuel had hidden it inside the hollow axle of his cart because Harcourt searched his desk. He drew out a narrow, folded slip marked 418. It carried the same entry as the missing page. His signature, and the impression of Adrian's seal made before Harcourt regained the matrix. The gift could now be proved. Samuel had also seen Harcourt load Bracken into the green cart and heard him tell Silas Vane that Lord Fenton would pay 400 guineas once the dog performed before the judges. Perform? How Eleanor asked. Samuel swallowed. They brought a boar from Fenton's private preserve. It is penned beyond the exhibition copse. A wild boar could tear through a lambing pen, overturn a horse, or kill a man. Harcourt meant to create a spectacular danger. Command Bracken to stop it, and sell the dog at the height of everyone's astonishment. If Bracken failed, the beast might destroy Eleanor's remaining flock, which had been moved to the exhibition by forged order. Either result removed her claim. Adrian wanted to send armed men immediately. Eleanor stopped him. Harcourt controlled several keepers, possessed copied seals, and could move the boar or kill Bracken before they arrived. Samuel's counterfoil proved ownership, but not the attacks. The forged lease surrender, or the trap at the hedge. They needed Harcourt to produce the whistle, command the trained animals, and state his claim before witnesses. You are asking me to permit a danger we know exists, Adrian said. I'm asking you to contain it without warning the man who created it. Eleanor drew the exhibition ground from memory. The livestock ring stood below a stone terrace. The boar pen was beyond the copse to the north. A drainage lane ran between the two. If they blocked the public entrances and left the lane open, the boar would follow the blood scent toward the ring exactly as Harcourt intended. But spectators could be moved behind the terrace wall. Her flock could be held in the stone judging enclosure. Bracken had already shown that he drove danger away from boundaries rather than chasing blindly. "You trust him?" Adrian said. "I trust what he has chosen when no one forced him." "And me?" The question escaped before the Duke could hide it. Eleanor met his eyes. "I trust the choice you make next." Before dawn, Adrian summoned the county magistrate. His solicitor, the chief constable, and 3 independent agricultural judges. He showed them the false receipt, altered inventory, training pages, and Samuel's counterfoil. He did not ask them to accept Eleanor's innocence on his rank. He asked them to watch, record, and prevent harm. The magistrate agreed reluctantly. Constables hid behind the terrace and along the drainage lane. John Bell, his head bandaged, insisted on attending. Eleanor placed him with Matthew Pike, where he could see every hand signal. Adrian then signed a 21-year lease for Hart's Fold at the old rent and lodged it with the magistrate before the confrontation. The document did not depend on Harcourt's guilt, the dog's value, or Eleanor's willingness to forgive him. "Your home should never again be the price of agreeing with me," he said. "This repairs the threat. Not the years my estate ignored your work. Those require a separate reckoning." Eleanor accepted the lease because it restored what her father had built, not because a duke offered it. "Then survive the morning," she told him. "We still have the account books to recover." By 10 o'clock, the Blackmere agricultural exhibition appeared perfectly ordinary. Farmers crowded the sheep pens. Ladies crossed the lawn beneath parasols, and breeders inspected horses along the eastern rail. At the center of the judging ring stood Bracken, washed, rushed, and chained to an iron post. His scars were more visible without dirt to hide them. Harcourt wore a dark coat instead of estate green and stood beside Lord Fenton as though he had never been suspended. Silas Vane guarded the gate. On a table before them lay a sale contract naming Bracken as Blackmere property. Eleanor entered alone. A murmur followed her across the grass. Harcourt smiled. "Miss Hart has arrived to return the animal she removed from the estate kennels." The Duke placed his chain in my hand before 30 witnesses. Eleanor said, "A temporary loan to protect a failing tenancy." Harcourt replied, "You then staged attacks to increase the dog's value." Lord Fenton lifted Bracken's lip, examined his teeth, and offered 200 guineas without waiting for proof. Another breeder called 300. A Scottish landowner raised it to 350. The mastiff, no one had wanted 4 days earlier, now drew bids faster than a racehorse. Eleanor felt no triumph. Bracken stood rigid, watching Harcourt's right hand. Adrian stepped onto the terrace. Harcourt immediately produced the forged receipt bearing Elias Hart's name. He declared that Eleanor's father had surrendered the farm and helped conceal Northwatch animals for private sale. The crowd's excitement turned against her. Eleanor let him finish. Then she asked Samuel Crane to enter the ring. Samuel identified the transfer counterfoil and explained the numbered system. The estate solicitor matched number 418 to the surviving stubs before and after it. Adrian's seal, Samuel's signature, and the date established that Bracken had been given to Eleanor outright. Harcourt called the clerk a dismissed liar. Eleanor produced the stable daybook and laid thin paper over the facing page. Her charcoal rubbing revealed the reversed impression of the missing entry. Counterfoil and impression matched word for word. A judge confirmed them. Lord Fenton withdrew his hand from Bracken's jaw. Harcourt changed his attack, even if the gift stood. He said, Eleanor had manufactured the wild animal raids and planted estate cloth to discredit him. Eleanor displayed the green strip, the rope, and the cartridge Bracken had retrieved. Matthew Pike described the triangular heel plate and its missing nail. When Silas shifted near the gate, everyone saw the matching iron beneath his boot. A constable moved beside him. Harcourt laughed. A keeper's boot proves a keeper walked in the woods. Then, explain the bait cupboard behind your office map. Eleanor said, packets of fox, musk, dried blood, purchase receipts for feral lurchers, and cut green cloth were placed on the table. The neighbouring farmers named the payments Harcourt had made after their livestock disappeared. Harcourt claimed Silas acted alone. Silas stared at him. Eleanor saw fear turn into fury. He told me the raids would clear the farms for Lord Fenton's road. Silas said. He said Miss Hart's father had discovered the false toll accounts and had to be frightened into signing. Harcourt moved toward him. 2 constables blocked the way. And when Elias Hart refused, Eleanor asked. Silas looked at the ground. Harcourt chased him along the ravine path. I saw the steward strike his horse. Mr. Hart fell. Harcourt made me carry a flask from the manor cellar and pour it over his coat. The admission moved through the ring, like cold wind. Eleanor's grief did not explode. It settled into a hard, exact shape. Her father had not failed her, drunk away his judgment, or surrendered their home. He had died protecting it. A scream rose beyond the copse. Harcourt's face changed. Silas had spoken too soon. But the final part of their plan was already moving. The boar burst from the drainage lane with bloodied sacking tangled around its tusks. At the same moment, 2 feral lurchers sprang from a supply cart and drove Eleanor's sheep toward the open ring. Spectators scattered. A child fell beside the rail. Harcourt reached into his coat and raised a silver whistle numbered 7. 1 short blast sent the lurchers toward the flock. 2 short notes and 1 long note made Bracken recoil. Then Harcourt curled 2 fingers against his palm and pointed at Eleanor. Take her, Bracken lunged. But not at Eleanor. He struck Harcourt's arm with the same measured grip he had used in the manor yard. The silver whistle fell into the grass without a mark on the steward's skin. Bracken released him at Eleanor's open palm. John Bell climbed onto the rail and signed protect. Boundary. Home. Bracken turned toward the charging boar. Eleanor did not send him to attack. She pointed to the stone lane, swept her arm wide, and gave the command John had taught her guard out. Bracken raced across the ring, passing the panicked sheep. He drove the lurchers apart with 2 shoulder blows, circled the flock, and forced them through the judging enclosure's narrow gate. The boar followed the blood scent toward the same opening. Eleanor closed the inner hurdle after the sheep passed, leaving the animal in the stone lane. Bracken held the entrance. The boar charged. He waited until the last instant, sprang aside, and seized the torn sacking rather than flesh. Its own momentum spun it toward the blocked end, where constables dropped a heavy timber gate. The boar crashed against the barrier but could not reach the crowd. Bracken returned immediately to the fallen child and stood over him until his mother arrived. For several breaths, no one spoke. Then Lord Fenton offered 500 guineas for the dog. The Scottish breeder called 600. A gentleman near the judges promised 1,000 if Eleanor would surrender breeding rights. Their voices piled over one another. Each man suddenly coveting the animal he would not have approached when scarred, chained, and called savage. Eleanor walked to Bracken, knelt, and removed the exhibition chain. He is not for sale. Bracken leaned his shoulder against hers. The crowd quieted. The magistrate recovered whistle, 7. John identified Harcourt's hand signal and demonstrated its meaning. The training register proved Harcourt had taught Bracken the disarming command years earlier. His claim that the dog had attacked him without cause collapsed before the same witnesses who had laughed in the manor yard. More important, Harcourt had used a hidden Northwatch command in public after denying any knowledge of the dog. The constables arrested him for attempted murder, fraud, theft, animal cruelty, and conspiracy to seize tenanted land. Silas surrendered the 2 missing account books from a locked chest beneath the Western Game Lodge. They documented years of stolen tolls, false repair charges, payments for attacks, and the secret bargain with Fenton's agent. Lord Fenton claimed ignorance of the violence, but the annex bearing his signature showed that he knowingly intended to acquire Hart's fold after eviction. Adrian cancelled every agreement with him and barred his agents from Blackmere land. The truth concerning Stephen Vale required a separate inquest. Silas testified that 8 years earlier, Harcourt had been selling trained dogs privately. Stephen discovered it and threatened to tell Adrian. Harcourt struck him beside the kennel stairs. Stephen fell against an iron latch and gave Bracken the disarming signal while trying to protect himself. The dog seized his arm and attempted to drag him from the stone floor, staining his muzzle with blood. Harcourt transformed the rescue into an attack, imprisoned Bracken, and later hid him among neglected estate animals because killing a numbered dog would have required a record. The old training note, altered inventory, John's recollection, and Harcourt's public use of the secret command supported Silas's account. Harcourt was eventually convicted and transported. Silas received a lesser sentence in exchange for testimony, though Eleanor did not call his cowardice innocence. Adrian faced the tenants in the same manor yard where he had given Eleanor the chain. He did not speak from the steps. He stood on the gravel at their level and read every correction into the estate record. Elias Hart had never surrendered his tenancy, falsified livestock accounts, or worked while drunk. The missing lambs from Hart's fold and 3 neighbouring farms had been taken through Harcourt's scheme. All wrongful penalties would be repaid from property seized from the former steward. The northern hedges would be repaired. Every tenant could inspect the ledger concerning his own holding, and future eviction notices would require review by an independent land agent. Finally, Adrian stated that he had ignored Eleanor's petitions, used her desperation as a test, and allowed rank to replace investigation. "Mr. Harcourt deceived me," he said. But deception succeeded because certainty was more comfortable to me than listening. That failure was mine. Public harm received a public answer. Eleanor's name and her father's were restored before the people who had doubted both. When the crowd dispersed, Adrian gave Eleanor the original counterfoil and the signed lease. "There is one further document," he said. It was a deed transferring Hart's fold from the estate to Eleanor as freehold property, funded by the recovered toll money that should have maintained the farm during her father's final years. "This is restitution," Adrian said. "It asks nothing from you." She read every line before signing. "Good," he said when she reached the last page. "Never accept land you have not examined." A smile nearly escaped her. Never offer a woman her own justice as though it were generosity. "I will remember." Autumn changed Blackmere slowly. Eleanor rebuilt the northern wall, enlarged the lambing shed, and hired John Bell as Bracken's handler and her first paid apprentice. She used hand signals in training, so command did not depend on hearing or a master's voice. Farmers came from 3 counties to see the mastiff work. Breeders sent offers in sealed letters. Lords promised horses, coin, and influence. Eleanor refused them all until she found 2 healthy Northwatch females recorded in the recovered books and living quietly on a distant widow's farm. She formed a small breeding trust with strict conditions: no dog could be sold for fighting, hunting people, or spectacle. Every placement required land, work, and humane care. John would assess handlers, and a portion of every fee would support injured farm labourers. Men had coveted Bracken as an object. Eleanor ensured his descendants would be valued as living guardians. Adrian visited Hart's fold first on estate business, and later with no excuse at all. He never arrived without asking whether the time suited her. He learned to repair a hurdle badly, to hold a lamb correctly, and to wait while Bracken decided whether to approach. Eleanor learned that his reserve concealed neither contempt nor indifference now, but the discipline of a man trying not to demand forgiveness. He told her how Stephen's death had taught him to confuse suspicion with wisdom. She told him how losing her father had made dependence feel like danger. Understanding did not erase what he had done. It made honest repair possible. At midwinter, Adrian asked whether she would permit him to court her. He made the request in her kitchen. With mud on his boots and Bracken asleep between them, Eleanor did not answer quickly. She had land in her own name, work that mattered, and a future no marriage could grant or remove. That freedom made her answer real. "You may court me," she said. "You may not manage me." Adrian inclined his head with solemnity, ruined only by the relief in his eyes. "I've seen what happens when I try." The following spring, Blackmere held another agricultural exhibition. Eleanor entered Bracken not for sale, but as the first guardian registered under the restored North Watch line. The judges awarded him a silver cup. When buyers gathered with new offers, he ignored them and crossed the ring to stand beside Eleanor and John. Beyond the terrace, lambs grazed safely behind a sound hedge. Adrian waited outside the rail until Eleanor invited him in. 1 year earlier, she had stood in a manor yard while people laughed at the unwanted dog placed in her hands. Now those same people watched the Duke ask permission to enter her field. Eleanor opened the gate. Bracken moved aside for him, then returned to his place at her knee. She laid one hand on the mastiff's scarred head and the other on the gate of the farm that was finally hers.